Oh, yeah. Really, I'm presenting.
Yeah.
Oh, what a good notice. So we are going to start. We are going to start with a video from our Vice President of the Sunday Group of this group of digital matters, Alex Agius Saliba. Let's start with this video.
Speakers, dear members of the European Parliament, dear participants in this webinar here in the room and also online. Let me first of all welcome you to our S&D AIDA webinar on artificial intelligence and also digital literacy for all, which is already a third public webinar organized by our S&D AIDA working group under the leadership of our coordinator, Iban Garcia del Blanco. First of all, let me start by stating the obvious. All citizens need the necessary digital understanding, the necessary skills, in order to be able to fully embrace the opportunities of an ongoing digital revolution. We need modernized education systems across Europe using the EU budget to support specific national initiatives on digital education and also AI literacy, training, upskilling, and also reskilling. We need educational programs which will emphasize the so-called STEAM subjects: science, technology, engineering, arts, and also mathematics. And we need a broad variety of new learning formats in Europe as an accompanying tool on all educational levels. We call for a pan-European initiative to develop new methods for the digital environment, which we could recognize specific digital challenges and also the importance of fostering critical thinking. Moreover, we need solutions to provide digital and AI literacy for adults on a continuous basis, taking into account existing best practices across the EU. Particularly, Europe must focus on and also invest in the reskilling of the adult workforce. Digital skills, which are constantly evolving, are now increasingly necessary for citizens to participate fully in society and fully in the labor market, and also to benefit from accessible digital services. Europe needs to retain workers in all industrial sectors, and especially those most affected by the advent of automation and robotization, in order to safeguard their social rights and decent living standards, and also to maintain competitiveness of the European industries and also our economies. Lifelong learning will become ever more important as a key factor for companies to succeed in all sectors and also for workforce to maintain their employability. We need also to improve the training and upskilling of all workers, including ICT professionals, in order to close the digital skills gap. However, education and learning should not be oriented only towards the immediate labor market's needs. It should support the personal development and the critical thinking of every individual to promote creativity and also innovation. This is especially relevant for children and adolescents, as from the early age, people should acquire a digital culture through knowledge, skills, competences, and foster an understanding of digital relevance. Artificial intelligence and robotics in everyday life, including media literacy, as a precondition for an active citizenship in the digital world. Young people's media competence is essential to ensure that they are able to distinguish facts from opinions. Also, they should understand the opportunities and also the risks of the digital revolution, including the impact of digitalization on our mental health, which may affect children and young people in particular. The EU should also promote the creation of research programs and networks amongst European universities in order to help European businesses and entrepreneurs to attract the best talent and become the vanguard of digital innovation worldwide. The scientific community is the driving force of the technological revolution. We need more investment to science, and AI-specific research programs, which can give the EU the competitive edge as a global leader in digital skills, AI literacy, research, and innovation. I wish all participants a fruitful discussion, and I am sure that the presentations that we will be hearing today and the questions that will be asked will contribute to further advancement of our knowledge and experience in this field, which is crucial for us in our work as European legislators and also as decision makers. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you. I don't see myself on the screen. I don't know if I'm on or not. It's on? Okay, now. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for your introduction. And of course, welcome to all our attendants and welcome all the participants. Thank you very much for being part of this seminar that we, the S&D group, are holding. A special thank you to the three speakers that are with us today, Mrs. Lucilla Scioli, Ms. Pilvi Torsti, and Ms. Inma Martinez. Thank you very much for being part of this seminar. Thank you to the members and the group staff, of course, as well. With their help, we can hold this hybrid webinar. This webinar is the third that S&D, the Socialists and Democrats group in the Special Committee on Artificial Intelligence, organized. The S&D group in the AIDA decided to use the opportunity of the Special Committee to reflect on very important points leading us towards a democratization on AI. First one was AI and labor. The second on AI and technological diversity. Today we will discuss on digital literacy, and we are holding the last webinar on AI and gender on the 13th March, to which, of course, you are also invited. Our aim is to discuss with you, listen to experts, and analyze specific aspects of AI development and deployment in Europe, in order to democratize its use, availability, and service to the citizens. As European Socialists and Democrats, we believe the European Union should become a global leader in AI and gain strategic autonomy in the digital transformation of our societies in the 20th century and the 20th century world. This is also the intention of the European Commission that announced at the beginning of this mandate in 2019 their focus on three aspects important: infrastructures, skills, and regulatory framework. We as Europeans, Socialists and Democrats, want the EU to pioneer a regulatory framework on AI, the first of its kind in the world, which will champion human-centric AI, anchored in human rights and guided by ethical principles. We want AI for the common good, putting people at its center, which will serve the people and the society as a whole. In our opinion, Europe must promote the development of AI systems guided by the respect of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, and in line with ethical principles of fairness, non-discrimination, privacy, transparency, and accountability. The Union can become the world leader in trustworthy AI while allowing and favoring innovation and helping our SMEs and startups to flourish. The regulatory framework and Europe leading by example is only one side of the coin. The other side requires a population that will excel in AI literacy and digital skills. Our intention is to lead towards a digital enlightenment of citizens of the European Union. In the 18th century, intellectual movement and Enlightenment thinkers believed they could help create better societies and better people. Their three central concepts were the use of reason, the scientific method, and progress. Likewise, the European Socialists and Democrats would like to enhance the digital enlightenment and AI literacy beyond practical, basic, or advanced digital skills, which are, of course, necessary to allow European citizens to achieve a comprehensive understanding of the opportunities and risks on AI, and to have the competencies for a full active part in the digital transition and its democratization. We acknowledge the efforts coming from the EU, the recognition that skills is one of the pillars of the Digital Compass 2030 of the Union, the Digital Skills Agenda already approved in 2019, the inclusion of digital and skills into the Joint Declaration on Digital Rights and Principles for the Digital Decade. We would like to use this webinar to think together with you. What else can we do to ensure the digital enlightenment is leaving no one behind? We advocate for an AI literacy framework for citizens, but also for the public and private sector, especially the SMEs, which will provide relevant AI training and learning opportunities on national as well as EU level. We are convinced that equal access to quality AI education and training in the EU will also significantly contribute to closing the existing social and regional AI gaps. But most importantly, citizens with a high level of overall digital literacy are the best guarantee of a democratic oversight over all AI technologies, which in turn should be understandable to all. Now, let's start to our webinar. I'm going to present the three of our main participants today, and at the end of their presentation, their address, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions or to make an address as well directed to our participants. I would like to invite to raise questions to everybody, invite, of course, also to the experts to discuss among them, and also we have our S&D shadow reporters in the AIDA report, and reported on the AI Act, more important indeed, in AI Act, Brando Benifei, that is on my right-hand side. So I'm going to present, first of all, the first speaker, Ms. Lucilla Scioli, that is the Director for Artificial Intelligence and Digital Industry within Director General Connect and the European Commission. She is responsible for the coordination of the European digitalization of industry strategy and for policy development in the area of artificial intelligence. So, Ms. Scioli, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this event. So we have spoken many times before, and we normally talk about the regulatory framework, or we talk about the investments that we make in research and innovation in artificial intelligence. But as you also said, investment in skills is equally important. It is important because it is only with skills that we can help the democratization of AI, and also people can understand that they shouldn't be scared or fear AI. And we need this step because AI is going to be very important for our economies and societies. And artificial intelligence is a very versatile technology. It applies in virtually all economic sectors, from manufacturing to services. And it's for this reason that we have to make sure, first of all, that we have a sufficient number of people that are data scientists or actually able to program and develop artificial intelligence. And on the other hand, we also have to make sure that people are actually capable of understanding how AI works and are capable to work with it. And so they don't have to program it, but they simply have to work with it. And I'm thinking in particular, for example, of doctors. During the pandemic, we distributed AI scan systems that could read radios to identify whether lungs of patients were infected by COVID. And there, of course, we ask radiologists to be able to work with AI without having to program it, but at least being able to understand how AI can read those images and what kind of information they can provide and how to interpret that information. So this means that AI skills are not only about programming AI, but they are also about people working with AI. And I gave you examples of doctors, but you can apply this to many, many areas, from people doing law to people working in agriculture. And so I think that we should try to invest in the teaching of artificial intelligence in all the faculties, not only for people studying computing science or statistics, but really all the faculties. Everybody needs to be informed about AI and needs to be able to work with it. And thirdly, we have to be able to increase, as I said, the talent pool of people working in AI, not only because we need more people working in AI, but also because we need to increase the diversity of those people. We often talk about the regulatory framework on AI, and when we talk about the regulatory framework on AI, the most important, let's say, issue we try to address is bias. So one important element to mitigate the issue of bias in the development of AI is to have a diverse team working on AI. So that means having more girls, or having more people that come from different backgrounds and have different profiles, and that can really create diverse teams. And it is only diverse teams who can really reflect more about bias in the moment in which they are developing AI. So any kind of policy also has to look at this kind of diverse dimension. And one way of, for example, supporting more women in AI is to create scholarships that would be particularly targeted at women. So I think that when countries create scholarships, for example, for masters in AI, a very good idea is to address that to women. Countries and our European member states are actually very active at the moment in the development of policies on digital in general and on AI in particular. We have very specific targets, as it was mentioned in introduction. For example, we would like 80% of people to have at least basic digital skills by 2030, and we would like to have a certain amount of ICT specialists in the European Union. And all this goes through national policies. We have seen that in the national reform plans, many member states are actually investing a significant amount of resources in digital education, and rightly so, because this is really an area that needs to be further supported, and the recovery plans and the Recovery and Resilience Fund is a great opportunity for doing that. But then we also need to zoom into something specific for artificial intelligence. So, for example, in the European Commission, we have a new program. It's called the Digital Euro program. And through this program, we are investing budget in support of financing new master's programs in artificial intelligence. We are also supporting the design of new courses in AI, and 4 new courses have just been published. And we will also be supporting the upskilling and the training in AI of the workforce in small, medium enterprises through the digital innovation hubs. And this is also going to be supported through the Digital Euro program. Generally speaking, member states are discussing policies inside the coordinated plan on AI. And this, of course, is looking at a variety of instruments that are available at the level of member states, and that will continue to be supporting both an increasing number of people undertaking this kind of studies, as well as an increasing number of actions, increasing the number of masters and studying courses available on artificial intelligence, as well as courses that are targeting lower levels of skills, for example, in vocational training, or even for the population at large. And this is very important, exactly because we need to be able to address the many facets of AI from all its different angles. Just one last word on the fact that many policies in artificial intelligence are looking at increasing the number of students to bring to artificial intelligence. And then, of course, when we create master courses for those students, we want to take into account the fact that we want to teach in Europe trustworthy artificial intelligence. So making sure that those studies reflect a little bit the ethics of what we consider to be responsible artificial intelligence. And that's very important. And these issues should also be brought to computing science studies and courses. So we want engineers, computing scientists in existing courses to be studying trustworthy AI. This is going to be a little bit the brand of artificial intelligence made in Europe. And as we develop our regulatory framework, we should certainly make sure that these issues are addressed in our universities. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss. Am I on? Because I don't see. Yeah. So thank you, Ms. Scioli. I'm going first of all to give the floor to our colleague Brando Benifei in order to raise some questions and some reflections about the topic that was touched by Ms. Scioli. So Brando, if you would like, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivan. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank all my colleagues from the S&D group for organizing with the AIDA working group and with Ivan this series of events on and webinars on artificial intelligence. I think we have touched many different important topics in this time. And now with the digital literacy, I think we are touching a very important point. I wanted to intervene immediately after Lucilla Scioli that gave us a valuable intervention, as she was in fact one of the leading persons so also for the AI Act, on which I am co-rapporteur for the European Parliament. When starting this work, the issue of fundamental rights was one of my first conviction. And it's true, in fact, that artificial intelligence will bring a positive impact on economy, business, on the entire European population. I'm sure that we can ensure that this can be the outcome. But we must nevertheless come to terms with a European situation that shows different degrees of digital literacy. And so if we want the benefits to be spread instead of the risks, we need to address the digital literacy issue. This is clearly stated in the data of the Digital Economy and Society Index on digital economic development in Europe. As, for example, an Italian I can assure you that being Italy one large economy in the world doesn't automatically mean that our population is well prepared on digital issues. And if we don't act immediately on digital literacy at EU level to close the gaps, even those that today are stronger economies will lose positions because of the lack of digital skills. And now that also digital companies have climbed the rankings of market value in the world. It's therefore our duty to focus on the training of both students starting school and university today and workers already working in companies which will see artificial intelligence increasingly present in their daily work. We must protect the weakest people who must not be left behind by an over-technological society, and all workers as well as citizens for whom artificial intelligence services and products are intended. We must always bear in mind that AI only works if it's built for people, if it puts people at the center. Otherwise, it's of no use. We must not allow to happen what has already happened in some member countries. For example, one case where a lack of care in design of algorithms in the public sector, this was the case in Netherlands, has led to many families having lost entitlement to social security benefits and even losing their custody of children. We must not allow uncontrolled use of artificial intelligence algorithms to penalize students who do not come from private universities, as this happened, for example, in the United Kingdom. These cases are linked strictly to the lack of knowledge of how artificial intelligence works. The training we need to think about for citizens and professionals is not just technical. We must think of new training paths where disciplines intersect and complement each other. Just as these 2 years of pandemic have taught us and that the right interaction between on-site and off-site work can be the best solution for everyone, so also the contamination of technical, scientific, ethical, philosophical, linguistic, legal and cultural subjects will be the best way forward in order to have an artificial intelligence that takes into account as far as possible the many aspects of societies in which we live. We have to remember that we are not building something static, but something that interacts continuously with people and the surrounding environment. We must teach those who will be at the forefront of these technologies that automating processes that start from the wrong premises will result in violating the rights of thousands of people, with the risk that it will be too late, in some cases, to remedy the mistakes made. For this reason, this phase of debate is particularly crucial in order to anticipate potential negative effects. We must always bear in mind that if something goes wrong, it's not the algorithm's fault, because it's always the human being who is ultimately responsible for the effects that the algorithm creates. Only a trained community that understands the basics of AI can understand how it works without being affected by it passively, and can recognize errors and report them to those in charge. So the need for training does not stop at artificial intelligence alone. It must be also regarding the effects more generally of algorithms that are not just those of artificial intelligence. And also it must go for support for the social partners. So if we look at the workplace, that it's for us as socialists and democrats very important as a place where learning must take place, not just in the formal traditional education. So to conclude, I want to say that training is really a fundamental pillar of this artificial intelligence strategy that we are putting forward with different acts, and it must be complemented by national actions, especially on one topic where, let me conclude on this, that divides very much our countries, and it's still a shame for our capacity to attract talent. That is the different level of remuneration that we give in the different European countries to researchers in this field. So people that dedicate themselves to studying this and that can contribute to the overall training of the community. We have very big differences. Thinking of, for example, of the PhD and postdoctoral action on this, we need to make it convenient also for our best minds to work in Europe on this and not go to other places in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brando. Indeed, this last reflection is not to forget. That is important, and many questions is not on the public debate. This is as important as other main topics. And now we have a bunch of minutes in order to make suggestions, to raise questions to our speakers. So if you would like to make it, please raise hand in the Interactio tool, or let us know that you are interested. Is there anyone? and there's another way to make this question, that is to be in the room like my colleague Adriana.
Way.
So you have the floor, Adriana.
Okay, I don't know if I can speak in Spanish. There are translations. Ah, okay. Okay. Bueno, muchas gracias a...
Thank you very much to Lucila, who's done a very descriptive analysis of how we're working on AI. And over the last few weeks, strategic autonomy has shown itself to be one of the most important tools that the EU could develop. And it's clear that digitalization and technology and AI are going to be the foundation of this strategic autonomy. I wanted to focus on something specific said by Lucila about how the EU is helping to set up special master's programs on how doctors can obtain these skills in AI and in their different disciplines and different areas of our society. But there is one sector of society that we often leave out of the equation, and it's important for us to talk about, and that's the vulnerable people. If we look at the studies, if we look at the countries which have the greatest number of digital skills, that's because they have higher literacy and they have better education systems and also better business literacy. So through these programs, how can the EU assist? How can the EU help that section of society which doesn't have digital skills, or at least not sufficiently developed digital skills? There's a gap between Finland with 70% of digital skills and other countries in the EU which don't even get to 30%. So how can the EU promote this trust in AI for a sector of the population which is often most forgotten? We're talking not just about engineers and doctors and so on, but reskilling programs, basically, is what we're talking about.
An accurate question to our speaker, so I'm going to give her the floor in order to respond. So, Ms. Jolie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I think, first of all, it's a great question because you made a very important link between the level of digital skills in a country and their level of digitalization. And you pointed to Finland, which is, with Denmark, the Netherlands, one of the most advanced countries and in digitalization, and which also have the high level of digital skills. Now, how can we help those countries that have big parts of the population with lower levels? Well, one thing that we tend to promote, and we tend to promote that through the social fund, is the creation of courses for digitalization. Now, let alone AI. I mean, I'm talking really much more basic digital skills. Earlier, I said that we would like to have 80% of people in Europe with at least basic digital skills. And believe me, we are very far from that at the moment. And it's quite amusing when you think that, digital seems to pervade our lives, but still you have very important cohorts of the population that do not have the skills to access to digital. And so we still need to have digital literacy courses, which are often offered, for example, by municipalities or by certain organizations. And what we can do from the point from Brussels is basically to offer support under the form of the social fund. And then, of course, with the social fund, we can also support training that takes place in companies. But in companies, in particular in the small medium enterprises, because otherwise in companies we expect also companies to commit to train their own workers in the area of digital. And maybe just one last point in reminding that indeed Finland, for example, has some great programs, and they are the ones who devised the program on artificial intelligence for everyone. And you can get a certificate for having followed that artificial intelligence course, which is available online. And what we did in the European Commission is that we translated this course in all the European languages. And so this is what we are trying to do from Brussels.
Thank you very much, Ms. Scioli. I'm going to switch to Spanish to make my own question because I was reflecting on this topic I'm going to ask. Y la pregunta es.
The question is derived from what we're discussing, Mrs. Scioli. I was wondering whether the Commission has any idea how to approach training in these countries. Do you have some kind of map of the different grades of proficiency in the different member states? Do you have a guide, for example, as to how you can ensure that there is upskilling? I don't know whether it's the Commission that is responsible for that or the member states, maybe in other cases. Basically, do you have in mind any tools that you could use to ensure that there is no more equality or no major gap in developing skills in different EU countries? So, in other words, if we can try to establish some kind of balance within the EU. Mrs. Scioli.
Yes, well, let me say, first of all, that education is a national competence. So at the European level, we don't have a lot of power, let's say, in education. So it is very much a national competence. What we can do is to use a mechanism that used to be known like the open method of coordination. So you compare countries from this point of view. And we have an index in the European Union called DAISY, which looks at different indicators of digitalization. One of them is digital skills. And we have an array of indicators for digital skills, which look at the level of basic digital skills, but also there are also other higher levels of digital skills you can look at, and you can compare countries in these different categories. And it is often by doing the naming and shaming that you can get much more effort from countries in that sense. At the moment, the European Commission is going to start carrying out bilateral dialogues with member states on their levels of digital skills. This was announced by the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in the State of the Union speech. And these dialogues are about to start. So I think that this will also help attracting the attention of the member states, which have been attentive to this for a long time, but not a lot has been done. So I hope that with the dialogues, with the fact that they have to spend 20% of the national reform program into digitalization, we expect that a significant amount of this budget also goes to training and retraining and taking a close look at the most vulnerable part of the population from this point of view.
Thank you very much, Ms. Scioli. I don't know if there's another question, any other interest to even deepen some of the aspects that were touched by our conversation. I don't see any other hands up. So I'm going to now to turn to the next speaker. Thank you very much. It was so interesting, Ms. Scioli. I'm going to turn to the next speaker, as I said, that is the Dr. Ms. Pilvi Torsti. She is State Secretary at the Ministry of Transport and Communications of Finland, and in her country has served in leadership and expert roles in the fields of education, learning, research, science, innovation, public policy and startup companies in Finland and globally since the 90s. And this experience he is on leave from the ministry to concentrate on global education issues and look after his own topics, of course. So thank you very much to be here. For me, it's quite interesting as the other speakers, but especially you, because I have to confess that I was talking about the Finland program that was pioneering the aim to make this alignment on artificial intelligence and in technology be real. And in this way, I'm so curious just to listen to you. So, Ms. Pilvi Torsti, thank you very much to be here, and the floor is yours from now.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Pleasure to share thoughts with everyone. And as was said by the already, I'm in a few months of leave of absence, so I'm a bit freer talker than State Secretary, and I rather address the topic as an education and to some extent also science and technology expert too. On the slides, I just had a few roles I've been in the last 20 years. So I've served both academia, and I'm adjunct professor at the University of Helsinki, and then the parliament and the government. But then also we have a company with University of Helsinki on early education called Hey Schools. And finally, very topical today, I've been working in the Balkan region, in particular in Bosnia and Herzegovina, since the war in 1990s on education, and we are running a school for children coming from different backgrounds there. I just mentioned this because I think it's always good to know when people are also giving their views a little bit at where they come from with their views. Next slide, please. But today, so I chose as my topic, and I think it fits very well to the previous speakers, elements of AI and other tools for all, Finnish experience and developments. I think the previous speakers have really set very nicely the scene, both in terms of the various currently running European programs that in my state secretary role at the Ministry of Traffic and Communication I've been very much involved with but also I think the scene was set in terms of the basic values, problematic issues on a policy and political decision-making level. So it allows me to dig a bit into more perhaps already somewhat practical approaches and then come to some proposals at the end. And I chose two themes, and the first one was very briefly actually referred to by Mrs. Dioli, so she built me a nice bridge, the elements of artificial intelligence course and some experiences. So let's start with that, and next slide, please. And here I'm borrowing actually slides from a professor friend from the University of Helsinki. I think it's just because this is very much a product of the university that we've been then able to promote as decision makers. So the idea of the elements of AI course originally at the university was to create an open source online course for broad audience involving a company in the design so that it would also technically be very easily accessible. Not only people who would sort of go and Google AI, but perhaps for people who feel curious but also a bit hesitant, and so that they would also feel comfortable in the way the course was designed. Currently, and this shows nicely how easily things are also spread. So it's not 685,000 registered users, but I checked the figure from last week was over 800,000. And as was mentioned, this became a European Union project at the end of the presidency of Finland in 2019. And I think it's worth sharing the story very briefly. We were actually contacted, the minister and myself, by people from who had been actively developing this course, with the idea that what about we propose that this course is made available in all EU languages and that it will be the immaterial gift of the Finnish EU presidency. First, it of course sounded something that, yes, sounds like a good idea, but how do we somehow concretize something like this in humans. But luckily, there were friends in the commission who offered to do the translations, and then we managed to convince people particularly in our budget department in Finland, that some funds could be used to then promote a course in different countries and also to localize some of its content. And so it started then the launch in 2020, while before the course had been available in English, Finnish, Swedish, German, and Estonian. So it was made available in all EU languages plus Icelandic and Norwegian. And then, of course, university people have listed some of the awards the course has won over last 2-3 years. I really challenge all of you to try it out, perhaps in English, perhaps in your own language. I've done it a little bit of it in both. And it's structured in a way, as you can see on your left hand. So you have 6 or 7 chapters with 3 subtitles, and there are also some exercises. It's pretty fast, so if you are familiar with the topics, it gives you you proceed very fast. And then you can also test, do you think it would fit, for instance, to some of your friends, your children, your parents, etc. Next slide, please. As a continuation of the elements of AI, which is all the time up and running, the University of Helsinki has now also created a sort of advanced course, Building AI, which is a little bit more technical, and it already allows you to do some calculations and programming yourself. And it also offers 3 different levels of difficulty. So again, to make it somewhat accessible for different types of people. But if the basic elements of AI was for AI consumers, so all the citizens we would like to see, of course, noting the digital gaps and so on. This Building AI is perhaps a little bit more for those who are already contributing, so working or managing AI projects. But so this was launched at the same time as the EU presidency language translation for different countries. And it, of course, has been used much less. But again, here we had numbers from a few weeks ago, it was 20,000. This week, it was 42,000. So these things tend to spread. And the structure is very much the same as with the elements of AI. Next slide, please. So just how the university has analyzed so far elements of AI course. So I think what I would pick from their thoughts was that, yes, I agree that the pedagogical style, it's not something that you get excited with. It's rather old school. There aren't videos, but there are illustrations. And the idea was really that it would somehow feel comfortable also for those who are perhaps not so digitalized or who don't feel so at home in, for instance, courses that are online. So in my mind, I believe personally that perhaps it's been quite successful to do it this way, while I also understand the criticism from some students, for instance, who say it's a bit boring. So it's made somewhat simplistic, and I think it should also work therefore for instance, older populations that do use computers, but perhaps are not so used to online learning. And I pick another interesting figure here, because we already discussed during the Mrs. Searle's presentation about the gender balance. So just during last 2-3 years, we've increased the admission of females to computer science in Helsinki University from 22% to 28. And I really believe it's thanks to this kind of sort of open access projects that have somehow brought forward the a bit different nature of computer science, if you like. Next slide. And this is the last slide from the university package where, well, next slide is coming and I'll talk it over anyway, where of course the third element, so if we had the basics elements of AI, then we had the technical implications, building AI course. So then the third one obviously must be then ethics. And this was launched also at the end of 2020, and it's been done together in cooperation with several European cities from London to Amsterdam and Helsinki. This I have not yet, I haven't familiarized myself, so I can't say more. I'm just because I'm still on that technical course level. But once I get done, I will send feedback. Next slide. Then just briefly, another development or comment or tool I thought I should just mention here is our digital compass that we all, of course, are familiar with. Next slide. Because I think the digital compass with its four elements, and one of them being the skills, does provide for countries a tool which to use when trying to find out what would be perhaps for us the best ways to look into the digitalization for all issue. And we could take next, and then the next slide. And let's go to the next one. This is picture familiar for everyone from the compass. So if we take from the digital compass the skills, in Finland we are currently working on our digital compass version, and recently, a few weeks back, we had a working group meeting on each of the four elements. And in the element of or in the dimension of skills, these were the three issues that we singled out as something we want to start developing in terms of measures and also concrete projects perhaps later on. So first one, the emphasis on the idea of being a citizen of digital age. What does that actually mean, and what are the sort of implications of it for citizens themselves and for the public sector in particular, but of course also for companies. Then there is the skills element, which has been discussed quite a lot already for today. And here we are referring to different parts of education system and adult education, workplace education, and so on, that what kind of constant upskilling we actually perhaps need. And finally, what I personally perhaps consider almost most important when we also discuss the differences between countries is this broader idea of education for digital age. We have a word in Finnish that is close to German Bildung, which has a bit broader meaning than education as education. So it does include informal education and also this idea of being a good citizen, having a just society, and so on. And so within that framework of education for digital age, we've seen such issues as ethics, trust, transparency, transparent use of one's data and digital information, and so on. So it's through these three elements that we are now, three headings that we are at the moment looking at the digital compass work in Finland when it comes to skills. Next slide, which is also the last one. So I gave myself an opportunity to give some conclusive thoughts if some have already come up while listening to the others, and I would, if the moderator allows, just summarize them into three. The first one is that I do think we have quite some tools already to work on the AI and digital literacy for all. I described the elements of AI, and there are others. And I think it's up to us also to make sure people are aware of these and encouraged to use them. Second, the next level, and I think it was already touched upon, must be the sort of systemic level, curriculums, formal education, and very importantly, already mentioned in the beginning, for instance, workplaces and different places where different segments of societies meet. I would, for instance, imagine that the elements of AI course could be actually offered at workplace, and you could use some of your working time for it if that was found relevant. And finally, thirdly, I think one conclusive thought I have is that, as was mentioned, education is not part of the, it is a national competency, and therefore within the EU, we have somewhat perhaps limited opportunities. However, in this moment in time, I do see there are many opportunities opening to think education also on sort of global scale, and there EU really could take a leader role. And I just leave you with a thought: what if we, for instance, developed in a few years some pilots for, let's say, artificial intelligence and climate change on a sort of curricular material that we would share within the member states, and why not also with some others, and thereby we would also bring young people to think matters together through same materials, and also develop our understanding of those topical issues that are topical in every country. So that's for today, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Miss Torsti. The sun has decided to enlighten myself. That is quite important. We're talking about enlightenment. I'm going to encourage our participants, our attendants, to participate actively in their debate. If anyone have a question to raise to Ms. Torsti, this is the time. If not, I encourage as well to the participants, to the speakers themselves to speak each other. This is a lively event. It's absolutely open in the method, just to make this kind of interventions. If not, I'm going to ask some questions that arise me of your intervention. I don't see anyone for the moment, so I'm going to make by my own. One of them, just listen to you about the Finland experience. I was thinking that Finland, for many years, for almost always, was on top of this called PISA Inform about skills, about the education of young people in the member states, in all OECD, and you know that PISA try to rate things like reading, like mathematics, like the traditional skills, the things that were meant to make a better students. I don't know if you found a way to link your program with this educational program of traditional education program of Finland, and if in such way PISA is now at least thinking about to measure this kind of abilities, just to rate the level of the pupils and the young people in the countries. And besides, I'd like to make another one because I'm concerned about some of the groups of society. My colleague before was questioning about weak people, no, weak groups. That is one of the aim that we as S&D family are interested the most. But just concretely, how ensure to these abilities and the gift of these abilities are inclusive and includes, for instance, elderly people that, from my perspective, are people that beforehand you think that the acquisition of these abilities could be more resilient, more difficult. And what about some kinds of disabled people? I don't know if you were pointed out your aim and your goals on disabled people, or you had some kind of different tool in order to touch these groups. I don't know. I'd like to know it. The floor is yours, of course.
Yes, thank you. So if I group under two themes, your sort of relatively broad question, one on education and the second one on vulnerable groups of society. Now, perhaps I start with the latter one. Of course, it's obvious that in all countries, regardless of the level of digital skills and the standing in any indexes, we then see differences and yes, age groups, elderly people, perhaps being the most noted, but also others. And of course, that is true to Finland as it is to any country. Then, of course, there is variety in degrees. Few so perhaps thoughts, not necessarily not solutions here. One public service that we've used quite a lot over the years, over decades already, first with providing some computers, space to use computers and learn about computers, and now increasingly also to learn about different digital services are public libraries. The newest public library in Helsinki was already designed in such a way that it can be very much a multi-purpose place, and I do think that the public libraries can present us one way to look into the sort of new phenomenon in the society and how do we reach different groups of society, and which are places that are available for free, and so on. With elderly people, you of course have to first of all make sure that you do provide all your public services accessible also without digital skills, and we have to be very careful. In my personal life, I do think we should also always remember to recognize the opportunities, both for instance, you mentioned elderly and people with disabilities, that we've seen, of course, development of many tools that actually help these groups. If you have difficulties in moving away from your home, you can actually get more and more services, both, for instance, related to your personal needs, health, food, and so on, but also entertainment through digital means, and we just have to make sure that the devices are there and there is support when needed. And here, of course, we've seen during the pandemic quite some leaps also forward. But generally speaking, I do think it would be actually for our political group to look at this issue strategically, not both as a really a problematic issue, as an issue of equality. If we talk about human-centric AI, we also have to have the real examples to present very soon, and those examples have to be for all segments of society if we are to be honest to our real values. And due to lack of time, I will not go to some. We did some analysis of this actually during the pandemic, and we can come back to that later. In terms of education, general.
Apparently, we have a problem with the connection. We'll try to fix it.
Now I think correct.
Yeah.
So the second on
we can hear you.
Yeah, the second on education. The second on education, the literacy issue overall, so not digital literacy, but literacy and reading skills, has been of huge concern in Finland. We've dropped in our results in PISA, and currently there is something what we call reading movement that is trying to address this, which is publicly funded. And I will perhaps just mention one example what I think is important in all approaches develop, and it's the teacher autonomy that is on a very high level in Finland, which means that the teachers also can then assess a little bit their classroom situation and how they, for instance, can use devices to help the support of the reading of books, and so on, whether they, for instance, use electric books, whether they provide students with certain games that actually help them to learn to read faster and better, and so on. And that's I use quite a lot. I would stress it's very important teachers have the autonomy because you have different students in different parts of the country, different age groups, and so on, so on. So you can't really lead that from above too much, but you have to provide then relevant skills for the teacher and then let them sort of decide on a classroom level a little bit that how they utilize them. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Torsti. I don't know if there's anyone that would like to make some questions or so. We can wait seconds. If not, we are going to switch to the other speaker of this evening. I'd like to introduce Inma Martinez, and first of all, I have to say that I am a surrender admirer of our next speaker. She's among a lot of things, but She's member of the expert group, the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence for Innovation and Commercialization of AI, and co-chair of of the AI for Agriculture and Farming Task Force. Inma Martinez is an advisor to leaders in businesses and government on how to turn digital transformation into competitive advantage and contribute to societal progress. There are a lot of different topics that Inma Martinez is involved, education, assessment, a lot of them. So just today, she's going to speak about our main topic, about the illustration of people and artificial intelligence. So directly I'm going to give the floor to Ms. Martinez. So, Inma, si estás por ahí, tienes la palabra.
Thank you, Ivan, and thank you very much for the kind invitation of this group to allow me to present and to add value to the general thinking and what we all aiming to create for Europe. I chose to speak about one of the fundamental objectives that in the AI community we aim for, which is to create a human-centric AI, but also ensure that this AI is explainable to the people and it's
Ma Martinez, can you please press the speak button? Thank you.
I had my speak button on. Somehow it was disconnected. Can I be heard now?
No, now it's running. So
Okay.
going on.
Do I start from the beginning?
No, I don't need. We don't need so.
Okay, so I wanted to focus on the need for AI to be human-centric, which is an objective from the AI community of which I am part of. And just to remind everyone, the first attempt to create a human-driven AI system dates back to the late 90s. And it was thanks to an algorithm called collaborative filtering that, of course, it will mean nothing to most people. But if I tell you that that was the algorithm that Amazon offered to suggest the people who bought this book also bought this other one, human-centric AI begins with a desire to serve people and to recommend and personalize. And the second objective that we in the AI community have is that AI must be explainable and AI must be flexible and be mindful of the context in which it is deployed. So if we move to the next slide, I wanted to clarify really what is it that we mean that something is human-centric. It really is addressing human needs and also that is fit for humans to use with safety, with enjoyment, with reliability, and with purpose. So it has to obey the usability and functionality and conveniency of the majority of products and services in the world, but above all, it has to address humans' needs and aspirations. So if we move to the next slide, how we design this type of digital services and AI services is by using the Maslow hierarchy of needs. So AI systems are being trained to adapt to the physical needs of people. For example, they can detect if it's a child at the keyboard or if it's an old person moving the mouse over the screen. So we know the vulnerability, we know the needs of this individual user. And of course, we also are mindful of people with physical disabilities that the entire system has to serve, for example, people that need to have a sound system playing the text, etc. If we move to the need for people to trust a system, we need to ensure that it's non-biased. We need to ensure that any details, any information that a person puts into a system are safeguarded. Okay, so those are the basic pillars of anything built in digital and driven by AI. But AI is used in very, very abstract contexts, for example, social media. And therefore, we move into AI systems that have learned to interpret humans' reactions, the human need to be understood, the human need to have a self-identity that is appreciated by everyone. And this is where AI is being deployed in the world and yet not very transparent as to how it's being built. So if we move to the next slide, everything comes down to personalizing digital services to a person in order to fulfill what this person needs, but also what this person aspires. And the majority of AI systems that are trying to aim for personalization, they lack flexibility and they lack real understanding of the contexts in which people make decisions, which is why the majority fail to fulfill this golden globe of creating a bespoke experience, a one-to-one experience for individuals. So if we move to the next slide, if we were to develop an AI human-centric system and aim to create good in the world, we would achieve three main things. One, we would be able to be in a position to make better decisions. When AI handles data in large amounts and AI is trained to then understand the context in which people operate, we are able to offer a superior quality of strategic thinking, better choices, and really aiming for less and less mistakes and less frustrations. When we are also confronted with enormous amounts of data and when they need to scale things, for example, people that go and have a CT scan or an MRI test of their cancer tumors, we want this system to be able to see what an analog doctor cannot see and then scale it up to be able to serve thousands of people. Yeah. So we need to start focusing on the mindfulness of the environments in which people really need things to be perfect, to scale up, and to actually be mindful of their emotions. And last but not least, when behavioral psychologists, even philosophers, work with AI scientists and software developers, we all begin to create something that potentially could resemble a humanistic approach to delivering AI to the world, which right now it does not really exist. And this is why this is a central area for us in AI to achieve in this next 10 years. If we move to the next slide, then in truth and in real action, when you train algorithms to be human-centric, you need to train them to really operate in the real world, in the world where the humans live. And this is why, for example, level 5 automation of vehicles is still going to take a very long time, even though we are training with computer vision to interpret what is in front of me when I am a car. Is this a person? Is this a truck? And if you want to see how good everything is developing, we have all trained Google's AI computer vision algorithm every time we say that we are not a robot, and we have to click on the images of, yeah, these are all bicycles. Yeah. But still, we need to train the algorithms to live in the world where we live, which is immense and full of a million possibilities of what something could be. So interpreting the world, interpreting what is happening is still very, very hard for an AI system to achieve. If we move to the next slide. So what does it mean to create a human-centric algorithm? Fundamentally, it is an algorithm that it learns to serve humans the best that it can. So, for example, we have algorithms that are human-centric and they detect mental health issues, if some people display addictive behaviors. And what is at stake? That whomever has this type of algorithms driving their products and services will use them for good, for the highest benefit of the people using them, and not in their detriment, as we have seen certain companies taking advantage of this, superiority of algorithms. We also train algorithms to be human-centric in order to really make collective group segmentations of people, not because of their gender, not because of their age, not because of their race, but really based on what they do, not what they say that they do. So most of these AI systems are observational, and they really are mindful of why did this person did this in this context, in order for us to understand the motives. And really, the main goal of a human-centric algorithm is to make predictions. What is it that this person would do if I was to change any of the context, or if she was or he was going to come for the 10th time into the system? We must anticipate the needs. So human-centric has to be driven by the greater good and by really servicing the beneficiaries, which are citizens of this world. So if we move to the last slide, I want to run you through pretty much how we then service the famous Maslow's pyramid. So for example, a human-centric AI algorithm minding disabilities, or for example, ensuring that it can be trusted, that there is a safety within the system, or for example, that it's mindful of emotions, therefore it has to provide assurance and trust, and obviously understanding that the majority of people create lives and lifestyles whenever they buy and use products, that we never erode the self-esteem of individuals. Yeah. If we go to the next iteration, please, then self-actualization. This is the kingdom of Instagram. What is it that I am building of myself, and therefore I have to be protected by the system? Yeah. So if we move to the next one, it's got to do with how we deal with humans. Are we dealing with them in baskets, or are we trying to deal with them individually? Yeah. So user segmentations have to be better driven by the greater good. Are we putting people in baskets where they don't belong? Am I being recommended ads, and am I being recommended videos that really have nothing to do with who I am, etc., etc.? So there's a lot of work to do in that area, the way we classify humans. And in the next group is really, I think it's about predicting. If we are training algorithms to predict human behavior, it has to be based on what these individuals do and intimate knowledge of their lives. Otherwise, we will not be serving them correctly. We will then presenting to them a version of what we believe is what they want. And one of the greatest examples of this is extreme personalization of internet browsers. Is really making the internet become a funnel. So I'm not sure if when I Google something or I look for something on Bing, am I seeing the whole of the internet, or what the system thinks that I should see? So we're losing civil liberties if this is exploited. And last but not least, and the most important to me, is if we are going to measure people's behaviors and reactions, we have to create human-centric AI-driven systems that are fair, that provide equity of services and products, that are inclusive, that allow for intercultural values to come into play, and obviously that it is protective of the human mind and the human condition. Humans are fragile people that we must treasure. So I will leave it at that, because it's a lot of information, and I will be delighted to answer your questions.
Gracias, Inma. I'm going to ask again for participants I'd like to encourage you to raise the hand in the interactive tool or give us a notice of your interest to participate by any other means. I don't see for the moment anyone, so I'm going to ask by myself again. There's someone, I think. Okay, so I'm going to give the floor to the Torsti, to Ms. Torsti Pilvi. She's asking for the floor. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, as we already in advance encouraged to interact as much as is possible through the funnels where we find out each other's these days. I first of all would like to thank, I think this presentation was very good and precise in sort of presenting the different elements that what the human centricity of artificial elements implies to, and it will be great to get the presentation if possible afterwards because I think it's a helpful tool to describe for different audiences. What I was interested to hear to be developed a little bit more is what's your current view on the developments, and I take the example of the which is often of course given to us decision makers, that there were lots of expectations concerning the self-driving cars, say 10, a little less than 10 years ago. And then we've seen many of the developments actually being slower, and then we started to understand also the limitations of the artificial intelligence to some extent. And I think it has also been perhaps good for people to understand that some developments can't be predicted because then there may be obstacles that we didn't foresee. So what is currently, where do you see this sort of room for development if you take your last slide where there were many interesting aspects mentioned? So where do you think in this sort of human-centric approach we have the great promise, which will perhaps also, we should perhaps also prepare our populations for?
Thank you. Inma, the floor is yours.
Kiitos Torsti. Tervetuloa. I'm glad to say that I was a member of the AI community who built the first personalization system of the mobile internet. So I worked many years in dear Finland. So when we put any kind of digital system in the hands of people, especially with AI, because AI tends to make lots of decisions by itself, it has an intelligence that is embedded, we need to ensure that people are not overwhelmed and people are not overridden. So, for example, the cars is a good example. No one has level 5 cars of full automation working on the streets, yeah, because we don't have the regulatory framework. But indeed, many car makers already have level 3, and I'll give you the difference between a good AI-driven system and one that is terrible. In the US, Tesla has level 3 cars, and people tend to lift their hands off the steering wheel and the car goes by itself. And in many occasions, this has caused accidents. Whereas in Europe, the auto industry, especially in Germany, these cars, these vehicles, if the driver lifts the hands, the vehicle instructs the driver to put them back on the steering wheel. And if the person doesn't do that, the car will then signal to the other car that it's going to move out of the road, and then it will gently cross over all the lanes by itself, insisting the driver to put the hands in the steering wheel, and then it will park itself on the side of the road and call the emergency systems, because the car will assume that this person is having a heart attack or is completely unwell to be able to drive. Now, that is the difference between one regulatory system and another. And Both cars can do the same thing, but one has been instructed to safeguard the individual and be mindful that people should still put their hands in the steering wheels. So one of the aims that we have in the AI community is that citizens and internet and digital services users have to become AI savvy. They are the beneficiaries of products and services that are powered and AI driven, but also we need them to understand and to detect, is this recommendation being thrown at me because there is an AI behind it that is learning from me? We need to make them AI savvy. Why? Because they will be more careful with their data. They will also learn to override the system. No, no, Mr. Google Maps, I don't want to turn right here because this is my neighborhood and I know that I can continue straight. This type of the human still can override the system is very, very important in the early stages of us putting AI in the hands of people. So fundamentally, any product and service that is digital and is powered by AI has to abide by the ethics of AI. You know, it cannot harm the person. It has to be transparent so it can be audited, especially, for example, if people are applying for jobs. The company putting these applications in the market and developing the AI should be audited. They need to demonstrate that at no point the algorithm is always choosing single white males for the jobs, or that it has been trained to offer these individuals higher salaries than what is offering to the women, for example. So it needs to be auditable. And I think that in as much as we are now trying to educate European citizens to be digitally savvy, we also need to teach them how to be AI savvy.
Una muy buena reflexión. En cualquier caso,
Well, in any case, the example of the car is very enlightening. It's almost as important as technology itself. I would like to ask a question on the rights that citizens must have. In the Socialist and Democratic Group in the European Parliament, we are trying to promote a European declaration which could turn into a charter of rights at some point on digital rights for everybody. The declaration is a first step, but the idea is to make it compulsory so that these are principles which must be complied with in reality in order to guide this development of the digital transformation of our society. So could I ask you what your opinion is about whether we need a Charter of Rights? And at the same time, in the US, their administration there is talking about a Charter of Rights, and the Spanish state is being a pioneer on the same subject, and they want to make rights compulsory in practice. So can I ask you what your vision is? Do you think it's necessary to have a Charter of Rights? That's the first question. And my second question, talking about our general understanding that citizens have, and of course the must be the principle of the democratization of this process, talking about priorities and speeds, the speed of certain development. What do you think that we need to do? What do we need to implement in the way of dialogue between administrations and the citizens? But of course, the big challenge for us is how to do this. We're also thinking about how to establish this as an obligation So it turns into something practical, something that works beyond simply going to so many meetings in a certain amount of time to talk to each other. I don't know whether in your knowledge there is a country or a region or local authority which is already setting up useful groups or forums for the dialogue between the administration and citizens in order to guide this process in the most collective and democratic way possible.
I'll continue in English just because of the, how I started. But you were asking about una carta magna. I think it's really, really important that we remind everyone that humans and their rights cannot be overridden just because somebody is on a website. One of the things that, as a digital pioneer, I have been fighting my entire life is to ensure that people maintain the same rights that they enjoy in the analog world in the digital world. And there's many discrepancies that somehow they go under the carpet. And I believe that we need to start creating this Carta Magna so that we create a homogenic experience for everyone, especially now that we're entering into the future metaverse, where most people will not distinguish when they are in the virtual reality from when they step outside their house. So fundamentally, yes, is very much needed. And also, I think Europe will have the lead at international level of, how would we treat human beings as beneficiaries of products and services. I do not like the word user. I like a beneficiary. I am accessing this online shop because I am a client. I am a beneficiary of what it offers, and therefore we need to be mindful of their rights, of their disposition, of how they should be served at the best of anyone's ability. So absolutely, a Carta Magna is needed. Now, I live and work in the UK, and in the UK, not so much about forums between citizens and the government, but there is a traditional modern operandi of what is called the All Parliamentary Party Group, meaning these are open get-togethers of serving members of parliament and then industry experts and anybody else that wants to come along, in which real issues are dealt in the hope that these could become themes and propositions that then members of parliament will bring into the House of Commons. So I think that most citizens would like more transparency and more plain English in what is it that they are receiving. I think that the majority of people did not understand what the GDPR was. And I have never seen a government teaching people how to be savvy online and know that you don't need to read a bunch of terms and conditions to know fundamentally when someone online, a company, is asking way too many things of you. Or I believe in the education of citizens. For example, I remember some years ago in 2010, Google did a massive campaign in the tube, in the subways, teaching people how to create very, very safe passwords. Because the majority of people, the password is 12345 or the word password. So they wanted to educate the population, and first of all, please be safe and make safety part of your daily activity. So I believe that governments creating opportunities for citizens to express themselves and to really talk about their fears or what really is of concern to them when they use AI or they use digital services, and for us to have an open blank document where we gather all of that and we try to address it with honesty and with mindfulness. I think it's a genius idea, and I'm wholly supportive of it.
So thank you very much. And by the way, you remind me that I have to update my passwords, my WhatsApp passwords. So I'll take it into account. Is there any other question? No, I don't see anyone else. So I'm going to. Sorry. There's a question indeed.
Well, first of all, thank you very much to all the speakers because it was quite interesting. I have a question for Imma because the implementation of AI in social media is bringing us great things. For example, Instagram is now able to detect users or beneficiaries that might be through an eating disorder or might need of mental health assistance, and that is amazing. That is such an advance. But we are also being progressively informed of the risk that having AI algorithm might pose for the citizenry. For example, the risk of being radicalized more easily because the person only gets posts from a particular ideology in Facebook. So my question is, are we considering the development of not so perfect algorithm where not the 100% of the content is personalized?
Thank you for your question. Well, AI is intention neutral. It does what it does, and it's up to the company putting the product and service to really steer it in one direction to actually do the good or into the evil side of things. So I have been collaborating for years with the Mozilla Foundation, trying to demonstrate that the majority of the video recommendations on YouTube, for example, are in detriment of humans, and sometimes they're like really not targeted. It's simply, they just want to put more and more pre-roll ads. And in fact, there was a recent report in 2021 in which we demonstrated that up to 12% of the videos on YouTube infringe their own community guidelines. So, what are they doing about this? I believe that we need to put pressure on companies offering services to people that prey on their weaknesses, and they actually take advantage of their weaknesses, or for example, that they don't put a stop into their detriment within a system. And I know that the majority of them, because they're sitting in the US, which is a country in the world where consumers have very little rights, they don't think that they have to do that for us here in Europe. But I advocate for us to demand this type of tweaks within their AI systems so that our citizens will not be subject to these hells, that some young people suffer in social media. And this is why I believe in the famous Carta Magna, because we need to start distinguishing how we want Europeans to enjoy and benefit from AI and digital services, and probably lead the way for other nations that will believe in our principles, even though they might be in other geographies. So I always recommend that educating users is fundamental, and I think that we should probably, embed it into schools and education systems. They should have a subject called how to use social media and how not to use it. It's kind of like when in the 1950s sexual education was put in the curriculum. Well, I think that it's fundamental for European young people to know how they can protect themselves, how they can protect friends, and how can they demand that their fundamental rights are respected, even though they're using AI systems developed in other nations.
Thank you. Voy a aprovechar la cuestión para contar una anécdota porque me ha recordado.
Yes, actually, I'm going to tell a story because this reminded me of a question about the AI formulae and platforms, and to show that some smart digital tools do need to be tweaked in many different ways. Recently, someone who had a page on Instagram on history got in touch with me because they had problems because the search engine, every time he talked about the Mongol people, the search engine understood that he was insulting people who looked a certain way, had a certain handicap. And so there was this confusion between the term Mongol and a potential insult to a group of people. And the search engine couldn't distinguish between the use of Mongol being used pejoratively or to describe a historic people. And so he had huge problems, and the page was on the verge of being closed down, and he got in touch because of that. So I think that this does make it very clear that it's very difficult actually to then get in touch with people in Instagram to solve problems. And to avoid pages being taken down that are perfectly innocent, just as an example.
The floor to our last speaker, that is our colleague from the S&D group, Mia Petra Kumpula-Natri, that is the first vice chair of the Artificial Intelligence and Digital Age Special Committee. So she's going to make the concluding remarks. Mia Petra, if you are online, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Iban, and all the speakers. I missed a great bit due to the reason that there were two other meetings, and one of them also that Citizens Panel for the Future of Europe has gathered several times, and also on digital matters. So now when we think about together with the citizens, together with the members of national parliaments, together with the institutions and MEPs, we also have a word of citizens, how they see and what they suggest that Europe should do. I could pose the same question for the great speakers, that what we can still do on the AI Act now. So please send us a lot of good amendment proposals that we can act immediately. But then also this gives food for thought for many of participants, and I'm happy this record is publicly available later to have understanding for the digital literacy from the more perspective, broad perspective than only the piece of legislation we can do, but also what is much needed. So I think in order to democratize the digital revolution and try to keep this metaverse or digitalization in the hands of the democratic societies, we need to embrace programs, education systems, everything that helps citizens to understand it, because you cannot really participate if you don't have understanding and literacy. So we do not only the digital revolution for the few, but for the all, and then it really comes to the knowledge of the different levels, but everyone should have access to have the basic skills and knowledge to understand and then participate. So this is kind of basic level that is also always close to my mind, that watching the movies to understand the blood is ketchup is not enough today, but when driving a car, having the kind of general trust and understanding how the self-driving car is composed. Is it the way that Emma was mentioning, that it's designed for the human use, or is it designed according to the principles of business only, or some other reasons going over the human centricity? I'm happy also it was mentioned by the chair that the Charter of the Citizens' Rights is something that we want to look at and put our thoughts behind the idea that more is needed than the interinstitutional declaration, what will be the first step. But as it will be hopefully done in between the institution, it also should have them some legal implications, even that to guide all the legislation we do. And this is actually good, because then it covers all the sectors. And as everybody following the parliamentary work now, we do work on the platforms a lot, very concrete for the citizens, that how to see that issues that what is illegal offline should be illegal online. And now I quote that I very much think that the same citizens' rights or human rights we have in the analog world should be still remembered in the digital world. So as basics, we might be happy of the charters of the human rights, but then there are some cases that we have to underline that we take them a human-centric way to the digital world. But more closely on the literacy, I think we need also the knowledge and very high knowledge, so that the systems are well carried on and designed. So the very good designers, very good coding and knowledge, very good research and universities, everything in Europe too. So the top tier research infrastructure is the first, and then the leading education and research organizations. For AI especially, we have supported strongly as a group the distributed AI research centers. And for me, that also means that AI is developed in many sectors, and also the education needs to be taken. The AI knowledge and ways to understand the digitalization needs to be taken to all the sectors, whether it's on health, whether it's on construction, whether you are studying an engineer on engineer on energy, whether you are a teacher, or you name what would be the area of education without knowledge on the AI, and from the bottom to the top. But then also to democratize, we may not leave out the citizens with the vulnerabilities, or the age, or the gender, or the race, or whatever. So also we really have to reach everyone to keep them on board, to have digitalization for all and by all, with citizens and for the citizens. There is one special remark I also want to make. I'm very proud of the elements of AI mentioned by Dr. Pilvi Torsti from Finland, the country I also know best, but then also by Lucia Sciolli, and then also that there are new MOOCs developed, so everyone have access on those, and I'm happy that you can take it in all the EU languages. And then also this is an AI, but then what lies always behind the AI is the data. So how to understand data? How much we touched the question on the Instagram knowing about you, but then really the data economy is mind-blowing, and the data is everywhere, the basis for the AI. So kind of my data, where the data is developed, who has the access, all that understanding should be also taken on board. We have been championing in EU for the code, so that everybody should have basic knowledge or at least understanding on the coding, and now on the AI, but also the data and the whole structure. If you need to understand the finance or money, you need to nowadays understand more the data and how it is steering the world. So just to mention that this understanding the AI, understanding the data literacy, or so it is many components in that one. And still, I think we should not make it too complicated and demystify it. It is not very difficult, but it's nowadays it seems to be that once you try to understand, you immediately have a lot of letters that they just like I use AI, should I say artificial intelligence all the time. So all these terms that are not familiar for all the citizens, and it is also us for the policymakers when we do legislation, that we speak normal language, even we speak about the digital world, because there is digital world for everyone, and then the language should be alike. So every European have to have an open door to digitalization, and it is best carried with the safe surroundings, and we are there making the legislation so that it is not only your consent and your duty. We have to guarantee a society that is fair, just, and transparency plays a role there, and then active citizenship is possible when we all have the basic knowledge on the literacy. Thank you on my behalf for all the great speeches, and I will listen to for the second time those I heard, and then what I missed. I happy to have this in the YouTube available for every European and all the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. We are on time, so we accomplished our task even in this way, because all of the addresses, all of the speakers were talking about many different and interesting points. I think we managed to have a complete point of the topic itself. Voy a terminar.
In conclusion, then, one final point, although it's true that my colleague has just given an excellent conclusion, let me just recall that the whole question of digitalization isn't a minor issue. It isn't something that should be seen as an appendix to the kind of legislation that's being developed in the EU, not at all. And we feel that the regulation that's being discussed now needs to incorporate more points to ensure the necessary guarantees at all levels. And we're not really here addressing users or consumers. We're addressing ordinary citizens who have rights, have a right to know what's happening in their societies and to have a fairer and more democratic society. And we need to ensure that any development that takes place is actually not going to leave anybody behind. No individuals, no vulnerable groups, and no geographical areas that are going to be left behind either, so that there is a level playing field with everybody enjoying the same levels of protection from technology, which offers many opportunities. I think we need to stress always that we are facing a massive change that can be positive for humanity, but where there are many risks too. Once again, thank you very much to everybody that took part. I do hope that this seminar has been useful. I must admit I found it so. I've noted down a whole series of ideas and issues which can hopefully feed into the work that we're doing in Parliament. And let me just actually say goodbye by saying glory to Ukraine. Slava Ukraini. And thank you to everybody for attending.